Brigade.
Morning.
This is Ramona. Looks like we have 4 members on the call.
Good morning, Ramona. If you would do a roll call for us.
Sure. Oops. Roll call for the Budget and Finance Committee of the Navajo Nation Council, June 24, special meeting. Jamie Henyo, and your location, please.
Good morning, President. I am in Grants, New Mexico, on my way to Tojile.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Henyo. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., and your location, please.
Good morning, Shanella. I am President, Arizona.
Thank you, Shanella. Honorable Raymond Smith is present. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, and your location, please. Honorable Elmer P. Begay, and your location, please.
I'm present. I'm over at Ganado.
Elmer P. Begay is present. Honorable Amber Kenneth-Bott Crotty, and your location, please.
Yate Shada, this is Delegate Amber Kenneth-Bott Crotty. I'm calling in from Cube Springs, Navajo Nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jadeja. Honorable Amber Kenneth-Bott Crotty is present. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, and your location, please. And your location.
This is Delegate Brown. I am in Phoenix, headed to the Arizona State Capitol building.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Nathaniel Brown is present. Chairman, we have 5 members entering to roll call, 1 member not entering. Chairman?
Thank you, Ramona, for that roll call. We do have a quorum. Thank you, Shanata, Budget and Finance Committee, for being prompt and on this call. Let's move forward on our agenda. And DA Binibiye, Yakudo 8 citizen Behatetitse, Ada Binache Yakoi Yati, 2020 Binache, Citizeni Betani Tato. Doya Chiche, Dogi Odo So, the Sutra 8 in earlier. Citizen Kabihan, Yoshi, Chiche.
Good morning. I can provide this morning's invocation addition and okay. Hope everybody can hear me. And again, good morning. Yoshi, Tahdi Zato, Tashin Soto Kodo, Hadot, Abike Hoshi, Tahuni Slash or Listi Chenso. Rojo Lishna, San Hima, Johna Inhita, Shigakon, Asani, Zenikon, Nawe Nikli, Niajanikli, Digate Nikli, Yahnilson, Don Hermanson, Kohona, San Hima, Johna Inhita, On Tis Katni Dado. It's East Cock, who's Jen what they stay. Exchange home. Yahoo, he given ye that eaten. Yahoo, it was that was Arje. Now, son, then it's Arje Kia that has cargo. Arje naked. Belash la in lini bezabesh that ego combesh the combesh at ego kehit. I don't how is be is need konderani te pe kon hijadon hinne da hallodo ni tsisi igi ona ya te ko kada eo ni tado listin ye ya ko ni ta asani tini ego ni na sansa ani bka ya te ni tado listin ye tish ojodo listin sani ma asani tini ego ko ni ke don hijad ni tsis ni hinne ni hijay ni sakis ado ni sit aje adona ni tatskos ojogo hadas ego nan hititli Bebinache yat eho chana ni tlidole yat eho ni dadole eni hayala ho edole ko ipenbi yat eho ko yat skistona nas ha kehi ige nische nakade e hollo chibena hadi bebinache ni jay zol ko doron hije ko bena hadi tsi eba heni to dishna nani ma alonda kodo dishchi asani tni ego asto nat ishi ke kana gai shoba o bikidin I shi in to من ساكي استويت خدا أولني دخل إيك خدي خاكي هذا شيء هذا يا كدن زوكو أتهاس هذا يدي خاتو أتهاس هذا بعد بايدين سي إذا كون كدن إيدون دكتور أنا إيبن يا كدو هذا إيغون أجده يكدو شو بعدي نو تشمينا سان ما ينا سان كيا بخاكي isi ka ke hit o tishna sanima ne weni klin yajni klin adonda ko asali tni ego ni je bi gone yo ne bin ni khahut tikli yo ne khabishti le ebna cheko yat eho fransik histole yat eho ko ne dado le sis khaye ede hota hasina sanima وين شنو يجن شنو تيجي شلون تشنو ابناش تشتيني أنا غيب كهوجون تاني شلون تشنو تجوجودولي كيجي وجودولي ياكي كيجي وجودولي أنا غيب كهوجون كيدي الله ستاني تليدولي وجنا سنين. Turn the floor back over to you, Chairman. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. General Katrin Sunni. When I say calling it when it's not, I don't know how she needs. Now that it's there, you can't get in my car. Nationally, Kakaya, I had last check. But I, deep in EBS, a special meeting, Vandi Khadida, to discuss the one important item. So even not recognizing guests and visiting officials and a budget and finance committee. A Connie Sahano, other Che Shnanda, Delga Odo Son of Hatadozen. Sashna, the East Foundation Hasana, 24th Navajo Nation Council.
Good morning, Delegate Pena. This is Pernell Halona on the line.
Nate Shnanda, good morning, Delegate Halona.
Oh, that is.
Kayla Shona East besides Delegate Halona and Delegate Odoso. Let's move forward. We do have our legislative branch, our employees, Peggy Malcoy and Ramona Nelson. They're always here present with us, helping us out, moving us along, and we appreciate their assistance. Although anybody from the speaker's office of the speaker. Office of the Speaker, Speaker Damon. Okay, what about Legislative Council? What's the Legislative Council?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. This is Lurleen Tapahi with the Office of Legislative Counsel.
Good morning, Lorley. What about Navajo Nation Department of Justice?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. This is Mel Rodas, and my colleague Ms. Lowell is also on the line. Thank you.
Good morning, Mel. Good morning. Good to hear it.
Morning,
To
sir.
hear you on the call. What about Navajo Nation Office of Management and Budget?
Good morning, Chairman. This is Dominic Biel.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, Mr. Biel. Good to hear you.
This is Cordell. I'm on the call also.
Good morning, Nate. Cordell.
Oh, yeah. Ishnanda.
No, Navajo Nation Office of the Controller.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. This is Robert Willie here.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chair. This is Elizabeth Begay.
Good morning, Mr. Begay, and good morning, Mr. Robert Willie. Good to hear both of you on the call here. Do we have Office of the President and Vice President on the line?
Good morning, Shanantai. This is Leonard Sosi with OPVP.
Good morning, Shananta. Thank you for listening in, Delegate Leonard Sosi. Is there anybody else on the line from the Office of the President, Vice President? What about Office of the Chief Justice, Judicial Branch? Katrina, I'll open the floor for anybody I did not call if they want to introduce themselves for the record.
Marty Ashley with the Office of Navajo Tax Commission on the line.
Good morning, Marty.
Good morning, Shiaj, Division Director, Perfilia Fowler, Division of Human Resources on the line.
Good morning, Yateho.
Good morning, Shanantai. This is Sean Vendel, Risk Management, also on the line.
Good morning, Mr. Dale. Good morning.
Good morning. This is Ramona Antonez with the Navajo Epidemiology Center.
Good morning. Good morning, Ms. Niz.
Good morning. This is Michelle Morris from Navajo Department of Health.
Good morning, Michelle Morris. Good to hear you. Okay, with this, so let's move forward. And we do have an agenda before us. So Peggy, are you on the call here? Morning.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Budget and Finance Committee. Your proposed agenda. Hold on a second here. The proposed agenda of the Budget and Finance Committee of the Navajo Nation Council, June 24, 2021, special meeting. Presiding is Jamie Henio, Chairperson, Raymond Smith Jr., Vice Chairperson, via teleconference, Window Rock, Navajo Nation, Arizona. 1, call the meeting to order, the roll call, the invocation. 2, recognize guests and visiting officials. 3, review and adopt the agenda. 4, review and adopt the journal. None. 5, receive reports. None. 6, old business. None. New business. 7, new business. A, legislation number 100-21, an action relating to the Budget and Finance Committee accepting the Navajo Nation fiscal year 2022 general fund revenue projection, establishing the general fund budget amount and 3 branch planning allocation amounts for the preparation of the fiscal year 2022 Navajo Nation comprehensive budget and other related actions. And this is sponsored by Seth Damon and Amber K. Crotty, council delegates. 8, close of the session, written announcements, adjournment. The next regular meeting is July 6, 2021. Mr. Chair.
Shikiana for that reading, Peggy. With this, Budget and Finance Committee, is there a motion to accept the agenda as read?
Motion, Elmer P. Begay.
Shinanta, I'll get Elmer P. Begay motion. There's second.
Second by Delegate Carter.
Shinanta, I'll get Amber Kinasmakrati second. So there's a motion and a second. Established. Shadow, the floor is open. Shinanta, Budget and Finance Committee for debate on the agenda. Are there any questions or comments? We'll do a roll call vote. Ramona, you would lead us in a roll call vote to accept the agenda as read.
Thank you, Chairman Henyo. Roll call vote on the agenda. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. votes green. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote? Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair. Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Elmer P. Begay votes green. Honorable Amber Kinnesbach-Crotty, how do you vote? Honorable Amber Kinnesbach-Crotty, how do you vote?
Delegate Amber Kinnesbach-Crotty votes green. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Amber Kinnesbach-Crotty votes green. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown votes green.
Thank you. Honorable Nathaniel Brown votes green. Chairman, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 members opposing, chairman not voting, and 1 member not voting. Chairman.
Gashina, thank you for that roll call vote. We do have an agenda before us, and with a vote of 4 in favor, 0 opposed, chair not voting. We do have next item on our agenda is review and adopt the journal. There is none. Item number 5, receiving reports. There is none. Item 6, old business. There is none. Item 7, new business. Legislation number 0100-21 before us here, and we do have our prime sponsor and a co-sponsor present. So with this, Peggy, if you would read the legislation into the record for us, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to read the entire legislation. It's 6 pages and you all have copies. This is a reading of legislation number 0100-21. It's a proposed standing committee resolution, and Budget and Finance Committee has final authority. 24th Navajo Nation Council, 3rd year 2021, introduced by Seth Damon, primary sponsor, co-sponsored by Amber Kinnesbach-Crotty. Tracking number 0100-21, an action relating to the Budget and Finance Committee, accepting the Navajo Nation fiscal year 2022 general fund revenue projection, establishing the general fund budget amount and 3 branch planning allocation amounts for the preparation of the fiscal year 2022 Navajo Nation comprehensive budget and other related actions, be it enacted Section 1 authority. A, the Budget and Finance Committee of the Navajo Nation is empowered to review and recommend to the Navajo Nation Council the budgeting and appropriation of all funds. 2 and C Section 301B2. B, the Navajo Nation Code. The code provides the controller shall prepare an annual long-term revenue projection for use by the Navajo Nation government. This long-term revenue projection shall include all sources of funds and revenues available for use by the Navajo Nation government within at least the next 3 fiscal years. The annual long-term revenue projection shall be submitted by the controller to and be reviewed by the Budget and Finance Committee. The Budget and Finance Committee will present the same to the branch chiefs by the end of the second quarter of each fiscal year. A written narrative describing the methodology utilized to estimate revenues and a discussion of key variables affecting the actual revenue, including assumptions made, shall be included in the report. If deemed necessary by the controller, the long-term revenue projection may be changed as economic circumstances require. 12 NNC Section 830B. C, the code reads, the controller shall review and recommend an annual fiscal year revenue projection for all revenue generating sources for all governmental, proprietary, and fiduciary funds of the Navajo Nation. The annual fiscal year revenue projection shall be submitted for review by the Budget and Finance Committee of the Navajo Nation Council and will serve as the annual revenue estimate at the beginning of the annual budget process for the next fiscal year. The Budget and Finance Committee will present the annual revenue projections to the branch chiefs by the end of the second quarter of each fiscal year. A written narrative describing the methodology utilized to estimate revenues and discussion of key variables affecting the revenues, including the assumptions made, shall be included in the report. 12 NNC Section 830C. D, the code provides, quote, the Office of Management and Budget shall prepare an estimate of all external funding to be received by the Navajo Nation in the upcoming fiscal year and shall present this information to the Budget and Finance Committee and the controller by the end of the second quarter of each fiscal year. 12 NNC Section 830D. E, the code further provides, quote, the Office of Management and Budget shall prepare budget instructions for each fiscal year, which shall be approved by the Budget and Finance Committee no later than 30 days after the controller releases the annual revenue projection as delineated in 860C. The budget instructions shall include fiscal, financial, operational, policy guidelines, budget development timelines, and planning base amounts for each fiscal year for the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch. 12 NNC Section 830H. Section 2 findings. A, the Navajo Nation Council or Controller has provided the fiscal year 2022 general fund revenue projections showing a total gross recurring revenue of $187,323,000 and a net total general fund amount of $137,205,000, which is less the set-asides for projected revenue as follows. 1, $22,479,000, 12% for the Navajo Nation Permanent Fund. 2, $3,746,000, 2% for the Navajo Nation Land Acquisition Trust Fund. 3, $12,400,000 for the Dene Higher Education Grant Fund. 4, $2 million for the Capital Outlay Match Funding Special Revenue Fund. 5, $2 million for the Navajo Nation Water Rights Claim Fund. 6, $7,493,000, 4% for the Navajo Veterans Trust Fund. The Controller's memorandum dated March 31, 2021 is included.
Burritos for sale? OLS.
OLS?
Yeah, so they said last call.
Can you get?
The Navajo Nation 3-branch chiefs met and agreed upon their recommendations for the fiscal year 2022 base planning amounts, funding sources, and other financial matters to be presented to the Budget and Finance Committee. The 3-branch chiefs agreement is attached hereto as Exhibit B. C, according to the agreement, the total projected revenue consisting of general fund revenues and interest income from the Permanent Trust Fund, PTF, which is available for FY 2022 is $177,205,000. Exhibit B. D, as shown in the agreement, the funding sources for the $177,205,000 are as follows. General fund revenue projection, $137,205,000. Permanent fund interest, $40 million. E, in their agreement, the 3-branch chiefs also recommended to the Budget and Finance Committee their general fund branch planning allocations as follows. And this is a table. The first column is the budget category with a total, and then the total, or excuse me, FY 2022 base planning amounts with the total at the bottom, and then the percentage. So one, fixed costs. $18,013,778 at 10%, 10.17%. 2, external funds cash match, $3,500,000, 1.98%. 3, executive branch, $111,518,160, 62.92%. 4, legislative branch, $15,732,069, 8.88%. 5 is judicial branch, $15,765,782, 8.90%. 6, chapters non-administrative, $12,670,211, 7.15%. And so the total is $177,205,000 at 100%. F, regarding the personnel lapse savings fund, the 3-branch chiefs recommended that $3,019,319 be allocated to cover the FY 2021 general wage adjustment for the 3 branches, and that $3 million be allocated to the Navajo Nation Retirement Plan, Business Unit 118018, to cover increasing costs, Exhibit B. G, regarding the undesignated unreserved fund balance, UUFB, the agreement recommends that $20 million be set aside for the FY 2023 budget, which amount is consistent with the UUFB set aside established in Navajo Nation Council Resolution number CN 88-20, Exhibit B. H, the Budget and Finance Committee agrees with the budget amount set by the 3-branch chiefs as shown in boxes 1 through 6 in the table in paragraph D on page 3 of this legislation. I, the FY 2022 annual budget calendar used to guide the Navajo Nation's budget process prepared by the Office of Management and Budget is attached as Exhibit C. J, a strike-through underlined version of the Budget Instructions Manual BIM for FY 2022 provided by the Office of Management and Budget is attached hereto as Exhibit D. This strike-through underlined version shows the changes to the FY 2021 version of the BIM. K, the Office of Management and Budget has determined that the IDC recovery revenue projection for FY 2022 is $25 million. A copy of OMB's memo is attached as Exhibit E. Section 3, approvals and directives. A, the Budget and Finance Committee accepts and approves the FY 2022 budget-based planning amounts presented by the Controller as indicated in Section 2, Paragraph A of this legislation and in Exhibit A. B, the Budget and Finance Committee accepts and approves the 3-branch chiefs recommended FY 2022 base planning amounts and general fund branch planning allocations as set forth in Section 2, Paragraph C through F of this legislation and in in Exhibit B. C, the Budget and Finance Committee accepts and approves the FY 2022 annual budget calendar attached as Exhibit C. So that was page 4 of 6. D, the Budget and Finance Committee accepts and adopts the FY 22 BIM attached as Exhibit D for use by all Navajo Nation programs and entities for the preparation of the Navajo Nation FY 2022 comprehensive budget, as well as for the preparation of any subsequent carryover and supplemental budgets for the Navajo Nation FY 2022. E, the Budget and Finance Committee directs that indirect cost funding be distributed to eligible branches, divisions, departments, offices, programs, and entities of the Navajo Nation consistent with the currently approved indirect cost proposal. F, in accordance with the memo from the Office of Management and Budget and Finance Committee recommends that the IDC recovery revenue projection be set at $25 million, which is $25 million, which is subject to revision when IDC plans are up to date. A copy of the OMB memo is attached as Exhibit E. G, the Budget and Finance Committee directs that until such time as the comprehensive budget policy manual is adopted, the Navajo Nation programs and entities shall be guided by the existing budget policies set forth in Navajo Nation statutes and duly adopted resolutions. The last fiscal year in which comprehensive budget policies were established was when BIM was adopted in fiscal year 2014. H, the Budget and Finance Committee further directs and authorizes the Office of Management and Budget, the Department of Justice, and the Office of Legislative Counsel to take all actions authorized under their respective enabling legislations and plans of operation to recommend any amendments to the Navajo Nation FY 2022 BIM for consideration by the Budget and Finance Committee. I, the Budget and Finance Committee requests that the 3 branch chiefs direct all Navajo Nation programs and entities operating with external funds to provide all financial and funding information to be included in the FY 2022 budget to the Office of Management and Budget as required by the Navajo Nation FY 2022 BIM. J, the Budget and Finance Committee of the Navajo Nation Council requests the branch chiefs and the standing committees of the Navajo Nation Council follow the timelines established in the Navajo Nation FY 2022 annual budget calendar to ensure that all deadlines are met. Page 5 of 6. K, the Budget and Finance Committee directs the Office of Management and Budget to monitor the scheduled timelines established in the Navajo Nation FY 2022 annual budget calendar to ensure that all deadlines are met and, if necessary, to recommend revisions of the timelines to the Budget and Finance Committee. L, in accordance with Navajo Nation Council Resolution number CF-07-11, incorporated herein by reference, the Budget and Finance Committee directs that all Navajo Nation branches, programs, and entities shall expend funds from the Personnel Lapse Savings Fund only for the purpose of administering and maintaining the classification and pay plans established by the Department of Personnel Management. So thereafter you have Exhibit A, which is the fiscal year 2022 general fund revenue projection. And then Exhibit B is the 3 branch chiefs agreement, which was dated June 18, 2022. And then Exhibit C is the budget preparation calendar for FY 2022. And Exhibit D is the Navajo Nation fiscal year 2022 BIM. And that is a considerably large document. Scrolling down to the Internet Public Review document, the Legislative Council's memo is attached, and then the Internet Public Review document is there. And as far as I know, there were no comments on this legislation, Mr. Chair. That concludes the reading of legislation 0100-21.
I can't offer that reading of this legislation. Though with that, the Budget and Finance Committee, is there a motion to accept this resolution as read?
This is Delegate Brown, all motion.
Okay, Delegate Nathaniel Brown, motion. Is there a second?
Delegate Elmer Pibigay.
Delegate Elmer Pibigay, second. So we do have a motion and a second for legislation 001-21. Though with that, we do have our sponsors present. Speaker Seth David, are you present, sir?
Yes, Chairman, can you hear me?
Oh, Shananta, Celeste, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you very much. I know it's already a busy morning. I'm sorry I wasn't on the line earlier when you called me, Chairman, for closing out a call. But good morning to members of the Budget and Finance Committee and the staff and everybody listening in this morning. I do believe maybe we might also have the president, maybe the president of the Navajo Nation on the line, and then also Madam Chief Justice, as this was a formal discussion that was put in place and presented here before you. Mr. Chair, if you give me some time, what I can do is go over the comprehensive agreement, but most importantly, what the Navajo Nation has received in this year's overall gross revenue income, actually not gross, but projected revenue income for FY 2022. As a general funds revenue projections are presented, showing an amount of $187,323,000, and that is coming from appropriation that is a total minus the set-asides, which is the usual 12% that's going to the Navajo Permanent Fund, which is $22.4 million. The 2% that's going to the Navajo Nation Land Acquisition Trust Fund, which is $3.7 million. And then the Dene Higher Education Grant, which if you remember, colleagues, that was up 2 years ago to $12.4 million. And then the Capital Outlay Matching Special Revenue Fund, which is $2 million. And then the Navajo Nation Water Rights Claim Fund. And that is $2 million too as well. There also is a 4% for the Navajo Nation Trust Fund, which is $7.4 million. That's also is moving forward. So with those set-asides taken out, Mr. Chair and members of the Budget and Finance Committee, now we're sitting at a projected revenue of $137,205,000. Now, if you remember, colleagues, that 137, that's usually our base general revenue amount, and that's what we would be sitting collectively right now if it wasn't for actions taken by this committee. So with this committee's assistance, that we greatly thank that for your leadership, Chairman and members of the Budget and Finance Committee, who has allocated the amount of funds from the Permanent Trust Fund income, which has generally generated this time around an additional 40 million. So if we didn't have that, and if it wasn't for the actions of this committee, we'd be sitting around 137 million, which would be about $30 million short than what we did utilize for FY20 and FY21 overall projected revenue base. So with that, there was that $40 million, which was put in place, Mr. Chair, which brought the overall amount up to $177,205,000. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, that $177,205,000 is an overall amount of $10 million more that was given to the projected general revenue fund with the permanent trust fund income. So with that, the way that it's broken down, if you see in the chart on page 3 of 6, was that the individuals increase total amount from FY 2020 and FY 2021 was relatively roughly the same, around 167 million. Now, because of the $10 million increase, there was an allocated fund that was divvied up equally, utilized by this formula that was given to us directly from the Office of Management and Budget, who divvied up that formula amount of $10 million more. The only thing that was changed was, if you look at the fixed costs, that was an increase from last year. And that increase is about 1.9 million, or actually is 1.9 million. And that increase is allocated to the transmission line payment that we usually put through the process. And in this case, the last minute for the past 2 years, which I sponsored from the UUFB to pay for that transmission line. And that usually happened at the end of December. But that was actually put in the fixed cost this year. As we know, that's going to be a fixed cost for the next coming years in order for us to make that annual payment until those revenue funds are starting to come in from the transmission line rental fees or right-of-way fees, any kind of fees that are going to come off of that in order for us to make any kind of funding. The external matching fund is 3.5 million. The executive branch has stayed again within the same general percentage ratio. But if you look from this year or from last year to this year, they went from about 105 million to 111 million, $518,160,000. The legislative branch again increased the amount from 14 point, I do believe, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, Mr. Chair, I think it was 14.4, and the judicial branch up from 14.4 to 15.7. So again, those numbers are in the increase. A lot of the amount is just in reference to the same base revenue amounts from the 167 million that was taken from the 2 years prior, but just giving up to divvy up that additional 10 million that was put in place, Mr. Chair. If we could say, if we were going to have 167 million, we would still be at the same numbers. So these numbers are just equivalent to an equal distribution amount of the extra funds that was given. The chapters, non-administrative, as you can see, that's 12.6 million too as well, with a grand total of 177,205,000, Mr. Chair. There is that annual recommendation that you'll see in there too as well. Continuing on, members of the Budget and Finance Committee, as you know, the personnel lapse is something that's going to be discussed too as well in the future. And that's something that looks at the recommendations, not only from the 3 branch chiefs, but also recommendations too as well from the Budget and Finance Committee. In partial and agreement too as well, if you remember, colleagues, there was an amendment that was done by myself a couple months ago when we first found out that we had a huge amount of UUFB funding. And one of the main things is that I really wanted to set aside at least $20 million for the budget. But thankfully, again, due to the actions of the Budget and Finance Committee, that $20 million is not needed this year. So what is the recommendation, if you see on page 4 of 6, is that $20 million is going to be set aside for the future budget for FY 2023. So that's just going to roll over just in case if there's any kind of shortfalls or anything that's put in place. So it's kind of a safe net for FY 2023 budget, colleagues. So I just wanted to point that out too as well. In utilizing that, there'll be some management discussion items. Maybe OMB will talk about the process, and I don't know if Madam Controller is on the line, but this is just to get us through the beginning stages, approve the BIM manual and get things going in order for us to go ahead and receive the beginning process of the FY 2022 fiscal year budget calendar. Mr. Chair, that's a complete breakdown of the identified money funds that's been broken down on a presentation level. If need be, Mr. Chair, again, this is in hindsight something that's completed every year, usually way before June. But as we know, coming out of the pandemic, there's other things that we had to consider and work through. So, Mr. Chair and members of the Budget and Finance Committee, if there's any questions on the breakdown of the budgetary line items for the general fund revenue projection, including the permanent fund income interest, I'm here for questions, but I do stand as action that Office of Management Budget could be on the line, and Madam Controller could be on the line too as well to answer any kind of further agreement questions, Chair. So with that, I'll go ahead and yield back to the floor at this time. And again, good morning to everybody that's listening in online. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Speaker Damon, for that presentation on this legislation. So this to Budget and Finance Committee, are there any questions regarding legislation 0100-21?
Sure.
You have the floor.
All right, thank you, thank you, Speaker Damon. Thank you for your sponsoring this legislation, and then also the presentation that you did. My question goes to on the comprehensive budget regarding the set sites on the capital matching funds. Do you know can OOC or OMB provide the maybe from the previous FY 2020 the overall accounts, or maybe the review of the balance, or who all uses those funds? Maybe I would say that like that on the capital matching funds regarding the $2 million. That was my question. Do you know who I talked to, or how can somebody provide that information with me? Thank you.
For that question. Budget and Finance Committee members, any further questions?
Chair, this is Delegate Brown.
Delegate Nathaniel Brown, you have the floor.
Oh yeah, thank you, Chair, the Budget and Finance Committee. Speaker Damon, thank you for the legislation. What is I know that the budget was read to us and the legislation. What is the difference and the shortfall for this coming budget season? Is there a possibility of, well, actually, if you can just give me the dollar amount, and then the next year, do we have a projection since the closure of Kayenta Peabody Mine, also the closure of Navajo Generating Station? The other thing that I'm not sure that OMB-OOC takes into account is when we were debating on the legislation for the closure of both revenue generating plants. Mind you, these are the plants that gave us over $40 million a year. and this council voted to close that, and now we stand at a shortfall. So, which means, what are the impacts as far as divisions, chapters, the projects that we are asking funding for? And also, again, back to my point, the other part that we have not taken into account, or I don't know if it has been, it's the every month, Kansas Peabody Mine, they paid their utility bill close to $1 million a month, which is about 800,000, or yeah, 800,000 a year is how much that was paid for the utility usage. Was that taken into account also? If you can respond to the difference, is there in fact a shortfall? And then also looking, and as Budget and Finance Committee and the rest of the council, how can we plan for the future of Navajo, for the stability of Navajo? I know that during the pandemic, also another huge consideration is there's going to be a huge revenue loss, and also the revenue loss, the lack of tourism or the closure of these parks. So what's going to happen? I see that our future Navajo Nation, we will have a huge ripple effect from COVID, and also with the executive orders from the president's office, and also the legislation that was line item that was vetoed, the reopening of these parks. So a lot of our Navajo people continue to suffer because they do not have income coming in. They rely heavily on the tourism industry in many areas, many different ways. So how is this going to impact our budget? Do we have to start consolidating? Do we have to look at our divisions and different departments on which ones to close? Do we stop hiring people? How do we look at Navajo's future as far as funding and money? And I think this is a discussion that we've talked about, but we haven't, this committee has not fully addressed. We have been very active to the CARES Act funding, and also now the ARPA funding. I think that I feel like this committee, if we can get all that full information so we can prepare for the future of Navajo, how to run. It takes money to run a government. It doesn't run for free. I know that we don't get a lot of volunteerism helping us. Maybe there are some, but that's not how the Navajo Nation is run. Even at our chapter level, majority are being paid. And then, so those are all my questions. If I can get a response on that. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for those questions. Back to Speaker David Tutsulet. Shananta, you would respond to the two questions from Delegate Elmer Begay and Delegate Nathaniel Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Honorable Elmer Begay and Honorable Brown. To answer your question about the first, I guess, Honorable Elmer Begay's question for the chapter non-administrative funding, that usually is, correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody's on from OMB or the Controller's Office, and who might answer that more thoroughly, I can give them the floor after this, but the non-administrative capital outlay is given up to each individual chapter. That's divvied up on the 50-50 formula, and that's something that's given out every year. So that chapter non-administration budget this year is looking at $12,675,211. That's something, again, that's divvied up on a 50-50 formula, and that's given out to the chapters. To answer your question, Honorable Nathaniel Brown, I could say that there is no shortfall, but as you know, we could always use more funding. But if you're looking at the base rate of us functioning and moving forward with the Navajo Nation government, for the past 2 years, we've been hovering around $167 million in order to fund the entire Navajo Nation government. That's not including the set-asides because those were already taken out. This year, again, because of actions by the Budget and Finance Committee approving and recommending the permanent trust fund 5-year income plan, that has freed up $40 million. If that didn't happen, we would be sitting right now at a budget this year of, again, $30 million short on a shortfall compared to the past 2 years. But because of the actions by the committee that took this all the way to the president's desk, that income has been freed up, and that has given $40 million more this year. So that $40 million plus the $37,205,000 equals to $177,205,000. If you see that on page 3 of 6, that's $10 million, $205,000 more. That funding right there is impartial in order for us to move forward. So if there's anything to say, if there's a shortfall, there will be more funding that will be going to the executive branch and the legislative and the judicial, and there'll be enough funding to fully cover the fixed costs, plus utilize dollars from the capital match outlay funds this year to actually start rebuilding that revenue fund. So there's more funding that's available this year than there was in the previous 2 years, our Honorable Brown. Plus, if you're looking at what we're doing in this legislation, is that it's also identifying on page 4 of 6 that there's $20 million in the UUFB that has been identified to be saved for any kind of shortfalls. That $20 million now is being moved forward to FY 2023. And that $20 million is being projected as that in any case of it moving forward. So if you're looking to see if there's any kind of action that the Budget and Finance Committee, with what's here presently, there is an increase of funding this year, and there also be a $20 million set aside continuing moving forward. So, and that will be covering if there's any further shortfalls for next fiscal year, not this coming fiscal year, but next fiscal year, meaning FY 2023. Now, I can't answer to see specific questions on the projected revenue income that's been on any specifics, like you said, certain payments that have been made to the nation. That's something you'd have to ask the controller, but also in freeing up any kind of additional funding or response actions for individuals who are unable to work right now due to the fact or any kind of revenue that's going to be brought into the nation due to the fact that their businesses are not running. Like example, those businesses out at Antelope Canyon or those businesses out there in Monument Valley. That would be something you might talk to, we might see if Marty Ashley's on the line who could help assist in answering that question, or even the controller's office. So again, thank you, Mr. Chair. But if there's any further comments, I think Mr. Bial or Marty Ashley of the controller's office could further, and also DCD to further explain the capital outlay matching fund that Honorable Elmer Begay is questioning. Mr. Chair, I'll yield back to the floor.
Again, thank you, Speaker Damon Zitsula, for that response. Back to Shenandoah Budget Finance Committee. Are there any further questions or comments?
Chair Henio, this is Vice Chair Smith.
Vice Chair Smith, you have the floor, sir.
Well, thank you, Chair Henio, and thank you, Speaker Damon, regarding this legislation, and also co-sponsor Shemayaja, and the information that's provided here, and those that are listening, staff and Budget and Finance Committee members of Navajo Nation. Good morning. Thank you for the prayer, Shanella. My question is based on Exhibit A. Now that we're in June 24th, going into the third quarter, and according to this memo, it has the FY 2022 general fund revenue projection dated back in March 31st. Reason why I'm bringing this up is because this is a projection. Is there any changes on behalf of the time frame that this memo was printed out today? Could we get an updated one, if all possible? If there's any changes, if not, I guess we could just accept Exhibit A. I guess the Office of Controller can answer that, Ms. Begay, if this is a projection that will still be there. Because I read this at the bottom line of it, it says oil has bounced back since the pandemic has slowed. And if oil has bounced back, then we're making more revenue, and the projection may have changed and increased in the favor of the Navajo Nation's revenue. And additionally, because COVID-19, things are starting to hopefully go back to normalcy. On behalf of that, I know that we have Navajo Oil and Gas, and it was at one point in time where we hedged, and now that the market is, the demand is higher, and the price of the barrel of oil has gone up. That's one of my questions there, Chair Henio. And the other question I have, maybe I didn't hear the answer, maybe it was provided. I know we have the UUFB for the 20 million, and that's set aside, which is going to be inclusive in the FY 2022 budget. Now that we have the permanent trust fund that's been passed, 40 million is earmarked for the next 4 years at 40 million, but the excess will be available for projects. We used to have excess on this, but I guess this question goes to Speaker Damon. I know that the Budget Finance would allocate 20 million and earmark that for the next fiscal year. But now that we have the permanent trust fund for 40 million, that permanent trust fund was intended for that purpose. I understand that, but I just need a little clarification on that. Thank you, Chair Henny. for that comment. Budget Finance Committee, any questions or comments? Are there any further questions or comments on this legislation? If not, thank you, Samantha. So let's take your David.
Chairman Henyo, this is Delegate Cardi with the question.
Okay, Samantha, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Henyo. I'd like to offer the amendment, the modified amendment 1, to update some of our exhibits. Thank you, Chair. If our staff can read that into the record.
So this, Peggy, you have the amendment available before you.
Chair, our Delegate Crotty, is the amendment is this the amendment that's proposed by Legislative Council?
Yes, thank you, Peggy. There is a modification to that amendment that was just sent out shortly. Thank you. Or was just sent out.
Okay. Amendment 1 would be, I'm not sure if we're changing the heading of the legislation in this amendment, but it says an action relating to the Budget and Finance Committee accepting the Navajo Nation fiscal year 2022 general fund revenue projection, establishing the general fund budget amount and 3 branch planning allocation amounts for the preparation of the fiscal year 2022 Navajo Nation comprehensive budget and other related actions. And then it's sponsored by Honorable blank. 1, page 2 at line 22, make the following change. ... Projection as delineated in section overstricken is 860, new language is 830C, the budget instructions and so forth. 2, on page 3 at line 10, add a new paragraph B as follows. This is new language B. The controller has determined that the income available from the permanent trust fund, quote, PTF for FY 2022 is $40 million. A copy of the controller's PTF memorandum dated May 28, 2021 is attached as Exhibit A1. 3, on page 4, line 10, make the following change. And so it says branch chiefs as shown in boxes 1 through 6 in the table in paragraph D is overstricken, and new F on page 3 of this. 4, on page 4, line 19, make the following change. A copy of OMB's, and then memo is overstricken is, those 2 words are overstricken, new language, IDC recovery projections are attached as Exhibit E. 5, on page 4, lines 22 through 23 in paragraph A, make the following change. A, the Budget and Finance Committee accepts and approves the overstricken is FY 2020 budget-based planning amounts. The new language is FY 2022 general fund revenue projections, and then presented by the controller as indicated in section 2, paragraph A. 6, on page 5, line 11 and paragraph F, make the following change. Overstrike the OMB memo is new language, OMB's IDC recovery projections are attached as Exhibit E. And then 7, between Exhibit A and B, attach the May 28, 2021 memorandum from Elizabeth Begay, acting controller, as new Exhibit A1. 8, renumber or re-letter succeeding paragraph sections and exhibits accordingly if necessary. This amendment shall supersede inconsistent language contained in any committee amendment, which shall be conformed to the intent or language of this amendment. The Office of Legislative Services, with notice to the sponsors of the legislation, is hereby authorized to make necessary grammatical changes. That's the amendment.
Thank you for that reading of amendment number 1, sponsored by Amber County. Motion by
Delegate Amber Canazva-Crotty, is that right? Shananta, this is your motion?
Yes, thank you, Chair. If before asking for the second, may I ask our legislative council if that is the most updated amendment that is being requested? Thank you.
Thank you for that request. Mr. Pahi?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the most updated amendment. This is, as far as I know, as of this moment, this is including all the necessary amendments to the legislation. I do have some other comments to make regarding the BIM that's attached. As you may be aware already, if you've looked at it, it's a draft strike through underline version. So at some point, I would like to make some comments about that. But for now, I'm just going to comments as answering Delegate Crotty's question. Yes, this is the most current amendments. Thank you.
Thank you for that response, Mr. Pahi. But there is a motion for amendment number 1. Committee members, there a second for amendment number 1? Budget and Finance Committee. Is there a motion? There is a motion for amendment number 1. Is there a second?
Chair, does everybody have a copy of the amendment?
Shanda, is there a second? Amendment number 1? When once?
Is there a second? Going twice.
This is Delegate Brown. I'll second.
Delegate Nathaniel Brown, second. So we do have a motion and second for amendment number 1. Committee members, the question was, does everybody have a copy of the amendment that we received through the email?
Chair Henio, I have a question. This is Peggy, if I can ask it.
Since there's no questions from the committee, Peggy, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And this is to Laura Lee. On this amendment, do we need to include the heading and the sponsored by, that part in the amendment? Because this will go on the committee report. So I just wanted to know if we need to delete that first part where it shows the heading of the legislation, or is that part of the amendment?
Yes, thank you. Okay.
Hold on, Mr. Pai. Mr. Pai, hold on, please, until you're called upon. Are there any other questions, committee members? Hearing none. Peggy, thank you for that question. That is a good question. Mr. Pai, you have the floor.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about that. In answer to Ms. Nakai's question, I just put in the title of the legislation verbatim and the sponsored by, just for clarification. But yes, those should be deleted when they're not part of the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Back to motion party, Shananta. Delegate Amber Canazva-Crotty. With that information on your motion for amendment number 1, does it still stand, or do you need to modify it?
Thank you, Chair. Can Ms. Tapahi restate that just so that I understand what's the request to modify? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If you would provide clarification, either Peggy or Mr. Pahi, if this amendment number 1 needs to be modified or not.
Mr. Chair, this is Luraline.
Yes.
Okay, so as read into the record by Ms. Nakai, the amendment is fine. If you look at the printed or the Word version of the amendment that was emailed out at 9:19 a.m. this morning, the heading where it states an action relating to Budget and Finance Committee, et cetera, and the sponsored by honorable, and then there's a line. Those are not part of the amendment. Only the items 1 through 8 on the 2 pages, those will be the amendment. I hope that clarifies things. Thank you.
It does. Thank you. Thank you for that. So I guess there is no need for a modification. Back to the committee, Budget and Finance Committee. Amendment number 1, is there any questions or comments? No questions or comments. I'll do the call for the question on amendment number 1. Ms. Nelson, Ramona Nelson, if you would lead us on the roll call vote for amendment number 1.
Sure, Chairman. Roll call vote for amendment number 1. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. votes green. Honorable Jeremy Yellowhair, how do you vote? Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote? How do you vote? Vote. Honorable Amber Kenneth-Bott Carty, how do you vote?
Shredded Delegate Amber Kenneth-Bott Carty votes green. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Amber Kenneth-Bott Carty votes green. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
No vote. Delegate Brown votes green.
How do you vote? How do you vote? Chairman, we have 3 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing, chairman not voting, and we have 2 members not voting. Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that roll call vote. Amendment number 1 receives a due pass, 3 in favor, 0 opposed. Chair not voting. So just moving forward back to the main motion. Any further comments on? Oh, I'm sorry. There was a question from Vice Chair Smith. So back to Celeste. Speaker David Shinanta, he would respond. Speaker Damon.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you, Cecilia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everybody again that's on the line this morning. Many meetings going on. I'm gonna have to ask Vice Chair Smith what his question was again. For
Christina, Shinanta, Vice Chair Smith, if you would restate your question.
Well, thank you, Chair Henio and Speaker Damon for the legislation. My question was specifically the past BNF has put $20 million aside for the upcoming fiscal year, and now we have the Permanent Trust Fund, which is $40 million. But as we well know, that the Permanent Trust Fund generates around about 43 million. And I think next year we may have a shortfall. That was my question. We did have UUFB to supplement, but now it may be a concern. That was one of my questions. Then I had a question for
Office of Controller, Ms. Begay, Elizabeth Begay. Thank you, Chair.
Shigella, thank you for that restatement of your question. Back to the Speaker, David. Sunda, response.
I'll try to answer that question. I think Vice Chair Smith, is your question is it concerning, or it concerns the $20 million that's set aside from the UUFB? If that's the case, then when we were discussing the amendments, if you remember, on the overall legislation that was put into place back in earlier this fiscal year, when the amendment for the Navajo Nation's veto message came out from the president's office, regarding the funds that or line item from the legislative branch, and then also line item from the personnel lapse fund. At that time, that's when I did motion to put $20 million aside for this coming fiscal year 2022. But fortunately enough, that didn't need to come down and be used in FY 2022 due to the fact that the permanent trust fund income kicked in and there was $40 million left over in there. Now, if there's any insight to say that maybe we could utilize that $20 million now, or for other reasons or something, I would still highly suggest that $20 million stay in there. And the reason why is, if you look at what it says on the legislation, these are all projected revenues, and sometimes we don't get all these revenues in time before the closeout of the fiscal year. If you remember back a couple years ago, before the 24th Council, there was 2 times. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Bial. I do believe in 2017 there was a shortfall on the projected revenue, and that was almost $10 million. We had nowhere to find that $10 million. Thankfully, the Navajo Nation Tax Commission gave us $10 million so we could cover our projected revenue. In years prior to that, there's been numerous times that we've never met the projected revenue. And the reason why was just because of right-of-way payments never came in. There's certain things that never came in. But the way that we would handle that is that we would utilize the base amount of our general funds to cover that. And then that would be the money that would be taken off the top immediately in order for us to still function and still continue on with a general revenue function or general revenue budget. So if you look at what we have right now, the amount of money is $187 million. That's what we got. But you had to take off the set asides. Now we're looking at $137 million. That $137 million is something that could definitely not come in this year. And that's the reason why we put that $20 million in there, looking for the future, just in case if we don't come up with the amount of funding for this year's projected revenue in FY 2022, or if next year's budget, as you indicated, oil might be good now, Vice Chair Smith, but you never know in the future. Oil might dip down again where it might be $19 a barrel. That's when we get in trouble. That's something I would be considerable amount of interest to making sure that $20 million is kept in there in order for us to go with that. There's the actual amount of funding that could be available in order to cover our base general revenue fund. I hope I answered that question to the best of my ability of, I think, what you're asking, Vice Chair Smith. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, not to the famous response. Yeah, we go. I was driving, sorry. Okay, now thank you, Mr. Gay. I believe you're on the line, our Navajo Acting Controller. If you would, there was a question from Vice Chair Smith regarding the projected revenues and if it could be updated because market conditions have changed, and is there a possibility of the projected revenues to be updated, or will it remain the same? Ms. Begay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and Speaker Damon, Budget and Finance Committee. I have several questions here that I wrote down, but first, Vice Chair question about the reliability of our projected revenue. On Exhibit A, there's a spreadsheet attached about the general fund revenue, as well as the projected revenue for 2023 and 2024. First, the concern on the oil and gas revenue for FY22, the projected is 27,919,000 compared to FY21, we only collected 4,404,000. So based on that, we already covered the increase in the crude oil, and this projected revenue for oil and gas is reliable. For the coal, this 28,835,000, that information came from NTEC. So we deem that reliable, and we carry that to 2023 and 2024. And the concern about the capital outlay match, who uses the capital outlay match that's allocated to the chapter. And according to our report, based on the balance sheet that I have here, there's available money that will be added to the 2 million that we're setting aside for capital outlay. There's only 767,171. But of course, there's basically reserved 8.5 million approximately from previous allocation to the chapter that have not been expended. So right now it's just on reserve. We can provide information on the chapters that expended their capital outlay allocation. We have to compile those, and we'll provide that to the committee once we completed the compilation. For the shortfall for coming budget season, there again, based on that spreadsheet that's attached to Exhibit A, for projected 2023 budget, net of set aside, it's only 130,151,000, and projected for 2024, again, it's the same 130,151,000. So the permanent trust fund income will be helpful to basically cover the shortfall. And right now, we're anticipating 40 million available. That's why we put that for the general fund. But for next year, there's a risk that we will not meet the 40 million because of the gaming enterprise. They're now on forbearance. They generally pay approximately 10 million a year. So that we need that take into consideration. And another question about the impact to chapter of the shortfall, anticipated shortfall in the coming budget season, 2023 and 2024. That is something that I believe OMB and probably the controller's office has to do an impact analysis on this, but the closure of the coal mine is already out of our projected revenue. Just the NTEC revenue is the one we're basically including in our projected revenue. And the question about the utility payment by the coal mine plant that shut down, that's approximately 800,000. That will impact NPUA revenue. And they should be doing some kind of impact analysis on that lost revenue from the coal plant. I think I answered all the questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that response, Mr. Gayadeen. Very attentive to all the questions that are being asked. Thank you so much. With this, back to the Budget and Finance Committee. We do have an opportunity to get started here soon. So, are there any further questions or comments regarding this legislation? Yes, Horseman.
Chair Henio, this is Peggy. We couldn't hear what you said. You were going in and out in your speech.
Okay, my car speaker is not working too. So, car mic, I mean. With this, Budget and Finance Committee, are there any further questions or comments? I think I heard Delegate Elmer P. Begay.
Yeah, it's Chair Henio. My follow-up on my question, the capital layout for matching funds. I know that there's a set aside on these for $2 million. I wanted to know that who can provide me a listing of which chapters or which entities were using this funding from the previous FY20 beginning that money. You know who will be the person that can share this information with me? Thank you. I think that was my question.
Katrina, thank you for that follow-up question. Now back to the Speaker Damon. Who would you recommend to respond to that question from that Delegate Elmer P. Begay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, as my response earlier, I turned that question over to Division of Community Development, and then also if there was a breakdown in payment, that they would be the individuals to organization to get Honorable Elmer gave that response. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Do we have Division of Community Development on the line with us this morning? Navajo Nation Division of Community Development. Delegate Elmer P. Begay, question, Nikki, we would probably have to hold it until we get community development to answer your question. But thank you if you will make a note of that. Take note of that question and send it off to Dr. Pearl Yellowman. Maybe she can provide an email response to the committee regarding that question. With this, Budget and Finance Committee, are there any further questions on this legislation 0100-21?
Mr. Chair, this is Lurleen from OLC. May I speak?
Yes, Mr. Pahi.
Thank you. As you can see, and as I mentioned earlier in my previous comments, the Exhibit D attached to this legislation is a draft. It's a strike-through underlined version of the BIM. And so I believe that OMB is on the line, and I wanted to ask if OMB intends to present a clean version of and if not today, then we would need some time to finalize the BIM to make it a clean version. If the committee members would turn to page 5 of the legislation, on line 17, I wrote in here, I've added this paragraph H. And the reason I added paragraph H is because as we were drafting the legislation on Friday, the OMB informed OLC that there's only a draft strike-through version available at that time. And so I included paragraph H, which says the Budget and Finance Committee directs and authorizes OMB, DOJ, and Legislative Council to make amendments to the BIM, to recommend amendments to the BIM, and to present those to the Budget and Finance Committee. So I guess I need an answer to the question of when OMB is planning to present a final clean version, and if not today, then of course Budget and Finance Committee would have to meet at some point soon to approve a final clean version of the BIM. And so that's my question and my comment for now, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that concern from the Office of Legislative Counsel regarding the clean version. To Solicitor Damon, your agent, Mr. Dominic Biel. When can we expect that?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me, first of all?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. What OMB will do is once the BNF committee acts today with any amendments to the BIM, we will finalize it as soon as possible and have the clean copy available. And that's the clean copy in final form that we will print and have available for all budget users. Now, for this version that's sitting before you, we were requested by Legislative Counsel's office to provide the overstrike underline version, which is what we did. So that was pursuant to Legislative Counsel's request. Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that response, Mr. Biel. And once we do take action, we look forward to OMB to get that same version out. Back to Budget and Finance Committee.
Mr. Chair, this is Lurleen from OLC. May I respond?
Hold on. Is there any further questions or comments from the committee? Hearing none. Back to the Office of Legislative Counsel, Ms. Sapahi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The problem with taking the version Exhibit D now, the strike-through version, and then just turning that into a clean version, there's a bit of a problem with that. Further amendments need to be made for two reasons. Number one is Delegate Crotty has emailed OLC and has suggested or presented a possible amendment that was, I believe, provided to her by someone from the Navajo Department of Health. And so that is a substantive amendment to the BIM that I think needs to be circulated to OMB and DOJ and OLC. And the second reason is the sections 800 through 880, which are part of Title 12 that are attached to the very end of the BIM. Some of those sections have not been updated to incorporate amendments that have been made to those sections by the council over the past years. So if someone is looking at those sections at the back of the BIM, section 800 to 880, they would be following some sections that are outdated. For example, in section 810I, the definition of condition of appropriation, that definition was amended by a council resolution. And I believe that resolution was passed in 2017. So Office of Legislative Counsel is still going through and collecting all of the council resolutions going back as far as 2014 to make sure that the version of sections 800 to 880 in the back of the BIM are indeed the current updated version of those sections. And so we need some time to do that. And then I believe at that point, once those amendments are revisions, edits are made to this draft BIM, then it should be ready for a final clean version to be prepared to be presented to the committee, hopefully at the next meeting, hopefully very soon. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so there'll be two meetings regarding this legislation then. One for today, then one in the future for the clean version.
Mr. Chair, my anticipation is that the version that's attached as Exhibit D to the legislation right now, that it will be further edited, further revised. And once it is revised again, then a final clean version can be prepared once the revised version is approved by OMB, DOJ, and Office of Legislative Counsel. Then the final clean version can be presented to the committee for approval.
Mr. Chair, this is Speaker Damon.
Speaker Damon, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Office of Legislative Counsel, for that presentation. Mr. Bial, I don't know if you're pulling your hair out right now, but I think the question then it goes back, Mr. Chair, if that's the recommendation, is that usually the BIM is approved and the final authority is here at the Budget and Finance Committee. And I think that the deadline was today in order to get this completed. And this would go to print next week in order for all the departments to know that this is something that's in place. So I think Mr. Bial would better be suggesting if there's going to be further amendments to the BIM, we can't. I think Office of Management and Budget can't print the BIM to send that out to the different departments. So maybe, Mr. Chair, if that's the case, maybe we should. A recommendation is to further work on those amendments, get those collectively done today in order for us to still be in the budget calendar timeline. But I refer that back over to Mr. Dominic Bial for further clarity. Mr. Chair, thank you very much for allowing me to speak on the floor.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we're sort of getting confused here now. Budget and Finance Committee, this legislation does have a motion and a second. And it's up for action today with one amendment. So are there any
Chair Henry.
questions or comments? Delegate Elmer P.
Chair Henry, I was go ahead and make a motion.
You have the floor.
Mr. Chair, this is Lurleen from Legislative Council. May I speak?
Delegate Elmer P. Begay, you have the floor, Shananda.
Is there anyone?
Delegate Elmer P. Begay, do you have a question?
Yeah, Chair Henry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, Chair Henry, by listening to all the conversation and then the discussion of this BIM, if you can you think you can share your guidance with me? If I can make a motion, is it better to table this or to go ahead and just go on with what was mentioned? So I just wanted your guidance so I can make a motion. What's going to happen if we table this before? Do we have enough time? That's my question.
Yeah, that's not for that question. And where the committee would need to go with this is that there is Mr. Pahi. Let me turn the floor back over to you before I continue on with my guidance as far as where the committee should go to Mr. Delegate Elmer P. Mr. Pahi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I can answer that question. I do understand that we are under strict deadlines here with the budget calendar. So what I would recommend is the committee can approve the Exhibit D today, and it can be finalized as the version is today. In other words, a clean version can be prepared, but that clean final version would have to exactly incorporate the strike-throughs and underlines that are in the Exhibit D today. That way, the final product that's printed out by OMB and circulated, the booklet, that booklet would be an exact match of today's draft exhibit, of course, just without the underline and strike-throughs. As far as the amendments that are needed, the revisions to the BIM, we can always do amendments to the BIM at a later date, and the amendments can be inserted at the back of the BIM booklet as a supplement to assist, everyone who's using the BIM, the programs and such, to assist them with knowing what amendments have been made. So that way they'll be following, for example, the current version of of sections 800 to 880. So I think we could get something approved today and have a nice printed out clean version by next week or whenever OMB does that. But to address the amendments, we simply do just a pocket part or a supplement that would be attached to the booklet. I think that would be sufficient. Thank you.
Chairman Henyo, this is Dana. I have a different solution to offer.
Dana, have the floor.
Thank you very much. And while I remember, I want to thank Ms. Tapaye for all the work she's done and recognize she's doing a fabulous job for Office of Legislative Counsel. This is her first attempt at the comprehensive budget. And so while doing that, she's gone back with a fine-tooth comb and looked at everything. And she identified that the Appropriations Act that is an exhibit to the BIM is not been updated. So my recommendation to get that part updated, I pointed out, there's just code provisions that have not been inserted into the Appropriations Act exhibit. So it's not something that B&F would need to approve. All that needs to be done is that the Appropriations Act that's attached to the BIM get updated to include the legislations that were passed by council. So if B&F wish to do a directive, that could simply be that the BIM, the final version of the BIM will include an updated Appropriations Act as presented or put forth by Office of Legislative Counsel, since it is Office of Legislative Counsel's responsibility to keep the code sections updated. So that would be my additional recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Dana, for that. Recommendation, Nado. Back to the Shinada Budget and Finance Committee and also Shinada Owner PBA. So listening to the recommendations from the Office of Legislative Counsel, seems that we can move forward with taking action today. So there will be no need to table Shinada.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Ms. Posse, and then Dana, Chief of the City Council. I'll go ahead and make a motion, and I believe that I was going to go ahead and make a motion just only on Exhibit B, but I think Dana explained it more. That, we can go ahead and do a motion. What Dana recommendation, Chief of the City Council recommendation. I'll make that motion. Okay.
What's your motion, Shinada?
Chair, can you hear me now?
Oh, I can hear you.
Okay, make a motion to approve the this BIM, the BIM to move forward with it.
I not the case, so we can. If there's no further questions or comments in the committee, we can. I'll call for the question.
Chair Henio, I got a question.
Vice Chair Smith.
Oh, thank you, Chair Henio. There was a question on the motioning of the tabling this. I think that this should have been all done correctly before we take action, and now we're going to make a directive after we do pass this legislation. However, The thing is that we should have had a clean copy and everything ready to go and acted upon it, and now we're backpedaling again in order to get this legislation corrected and waiting again. So, Chair, even if we did table it, we would wait until this is corrected and it would be put in place, and then we'd act on it with a clean copy. Today, how we're going to pass this as it is and make a directive and wait for that and then get that put in there. These things should have been taken care of. So if I'm in order, I'd like to go ahead and motion to table this until the next BNF meeting in order to get a clean copy. That way we can see it, we can review it and move forward to the next meeting that's going to be on BNF come July, or even have a special meeting if we have to. That's my motion. Thank you.
Vice Chair Smith, recognize your motion to table legislation 0100-21. Is there a second? Committee member. There's a motion by Vice Chair Smith to table this legislation. There's a motion to table this legislation by Vice Chair Smith. Is there a second, committee members? Is there a second going on? Is there a second to table this legislation go twice? Third and final call for a second to table the legislation. Not hearing any second. Motion to table dies. Back to the committee on the main motion.
Chairman Henio, this is Delegate Crotty.
Shinonda, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman, and I appreciate it, and I recognize the challenges with Office of Legislative Counsel. So I appreciate Ms. Tapahi for assisting the committee in drafting out this legislation. Chair, my question is in terms of Dana's recommendation on what would that process look like for the committee? Is there language that in this legislation that needs to be amended because the way that I read the current legislation, it's a directive for the modification. I'm not sure if there's clear language then once there is a clean version, that's the approved version. I think I just need some clarification on how we move forward, understanding that this is not a typical situation, but that we're trying to meet the deadline. And I'm not exactly sure why we don't have a clean copy at this time. And I think that's been an annual concern that I've had when it comes to the BIM to receive the underlined or the red line version and then the clean copy. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that question. I think Dominic answered the question regarding the clean copy. He stated that based upon the direction of OLC, they requested the underline and strikeout version be part of the legislation. But as far as the first question again, regarding what Dana had stated, Dana, are you still on the line with us?
Yes, Chair, I'm still on the line.
Okay, if you would provide clarification to the committee. regarding the question from Shananta Delegate Amber Bakrati.
Okay, thank you, Chair and Delegate Crotty. And this is going to be a two-part answer. The directive would be that Office of Legislative Counsel shall provide an updated version of the Appropriations Act to be included as the exhibit, or to replace the current exhibit in the BIM. OLC will do that prior to OMB printing the final clean copy. The directive will also include that the clean copy shall match the red line or underline understruck version adopted by Budget and Finance Committee. So, and I'm currently drafting the directive, so it's a little clearer, but so what will happen is version that Budget and Finance approves today, OMB will take out the underline and overstrikes, and that will be the clean copy. But they will not print that clean copy until Office of Legislative Counsel has provided them an update of the Appropriations Act. And let me mention that will not take too long. We should probably have that ready by Tuesday. So then OMB can print the clean copy. The clean copy will absolutely reflect what is approved by the Budget and Finance Committee here today. So that's the first part of my question, or my answer. The second part is that if we go down that road, I want to ensure that the amendments that Delegate Crotty has requested to the BIM, that the recommendation comes from the Division of Health, and it has to do with the review of grant applications, that amendment is made today, so it can be included in the clean copy. Thank you, Chair. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Dana, for that clarification. And back to the committee. I hope that was a clear explanation of what needs to happen. So with this committee, the Budget Finance, are there any further questions or comments?
Chair, this is Delegate Crotty.
Shananta, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate Ms. Barbara for providing that overview and clarification, and recognize that this is something different. So I appreciate all of the questions. I would like to ask Ms. Barbara or Ms. Tapahi, in terms of the amendment, we've been working, and I believe the committee is aware that there's always challenges. The Navajo Nation, we have over 4,000, I believe, federal grants that are managed through the Navajo Nation. And some of the areas of grants management in the work that we've tried to advocate for, and just to provide direct services, there are some what we call red tape, bureaucratic red tape. And in the BIM, we've identified an area and wanted to propose an amendment that would help alleviate some of this red tape when it comes to grant management. I'm not sure at this time what Legislative Council, I did hear Dana mention that the amendment could be made today. If we could get a timeline in terms of how much time you need to draft that amendment, I would like to make that proposal to at least assist or try to assist the grantees who are applying and receiving federal grants. The other area, Chair, is I have had some requests from the chapters when dealing with the BIM, and we've asked on a few occasions about Appendix M. I'm not sure, Chair, if someone on the call can give guidance to the committee on when it comes to heavy equipment operators. The chapters receive heavy equipment, and now it's not clear if their current PEP guidelines will support those operators. And I apologize if the question was asked. I do know that there was going to be a follow-up with Dr. Crow-Yellowman, but I believe this would be the time as a committee we would move to amend or clarify any language of the BIM that would restrict the chapters that we represent ability to hire and maintain those heavy equipment operators. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that question. Now, thank you for that question. So with this, two parts. Mr. Bial, are you on the call with us?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay, if you would provide a response.
It appears to me, listening to the discussion so far, that there's additional amendments to be proposed to the BIM. Now, all I can say about that is the BIM was developed with input from various offices, and a copy was circulated to Legislative Council. And then the entire legislation, including the exhibits, which means the BIM, was appended for the 5-day review, which technically you could say ran yesterday. So it's, as Speaker Damon put it, I'm losing my hair now, and so is other members of my staff, because we've done a lot of work on this, and it seems like the direction from Legislative Services has not been adequate this time around, because we keep getting different interpretations and guidance of what to do. For example, on the BIM right now, the underline red line or underline overstrike version was per Legislative Council's office, Legislative Services. Now, in prior years, we didn't do that. We just went with the clean copy. So that's why it's appended. So we just figured, well, there's a change in how it's going to be handled from Legislative Services. So that's that. So now we're stuck in this situation about how to deal with it. So Ms. Bobrov's suggestion that a directive could be made by the committee to ensure that the corrected Appropriations Act reference, it's attached as reference 1 to the BIM, could be done here and now, and we would include it in the final printing. So on the Ms. Crotty's recommendation on changing some of the language involving federal grants, well, I can't say. We don't have it. We haven't seen it. I believe Mr. Shorty's still on the line, and but certainly that can be considered today as well by the committee. Now, there was comments about, well, maybe going back and fixing it. That if that's the decision of the committee, we can certainly adjust the schedule. The timetable would have to be moved back again. Hopefully just a few days to to maybe Monday, or as Ms. Barbara said, maybe Tuesday, to ensure that everything is put together and is ready for final action of the committee. Mr. Chair, that's committee members, that's my remarks and response at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Biel, for your input to the discussion. Budget and Finance Committee members, it seems like there needs to be some more work done, especially the amendments, proposed amendments that are still forthcoming, and of course the clean copy. There was a motion to table that failed. It's up to the committee. If they wish to move this legislation to next week, Tuesday or Monday, Tuesday latest, Monday the earliest, for everything to get cleaned up, all the amendments to be written out, and then that way we can entertain the amendments at that time. But it's up to the committee, Shinanta, as far as how we wish to handle this. And but that's one option we have, is again to move towards tabling and have OMB, OLC, Speaker Seth Damon, Shinanta, to work through this to make sure that everything is in order for the Budget and Finance Committee. That way we won't have no hang-ups again. So back to the committee, Shinanta.
Chairman Henyo, I'll second the tabling motion till Tuesday.
Christina, there would have to be a new motion. Shinanta, Vice Chair Smith?
Vice Chair Smith, Chair Henyo, my battery's ready to go out. Yes, I will motion to table this as you have spoke till next Tuesday. We need to get this corrected. I motion that to table.
Christina, there's a motion on the floor to table legislation 0100-21 till Tuesday, June 29. At what time?
2 p.m., G.
2 p.m. Christina, till 2 p.m. Shinanta, Delegate Amber Canas-Bacardi.
I'll second. Thank you, Chair.
Christina, there is a second. So there's a motion to table this legislation 0100-21 till Tuesday, June 29, 2021 at 2 p.m. And there is a second. With this, committee members, Ms. Ramona Nelson, if you would lead us in the roll call vote to table legislation 0100-21.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Roll call vote on the tabling motion. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr. votes green. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote? How do you vote? Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Elmer P. Begay votes green. Honorable Amber Canas-Bacardi, how do you vote?
Shadow Delegate Cardi votes green. Thank you.
Honorable Amber Canas-Bacardi votes green. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
Delegate Brown votes green.
Thank you. Honorable Nathaniel Brown votes green. Chairman, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing, chairman not voting, and 1 member not voting. Chairman?
Okay, hello. For that roll call vote, we do have a vote of due pass to table this legislation. 4 in favor, 0 opposed, chair not voting. So with this, this takes care of old business and Satile, Speaker Damon Shinanta, if you would work with OLC and Office of Management and Budget to make sure that we do have everything in order by Tuesday. Actually, that's Speaker Damon?
Yes, I believe this is doing the Navigate.
He's got Navigate. With this, let's move forward to next item on the agenda. Close the session. Motion to adjourn.
Delegate Elmer PVK, motion to.
Delegate Elmer PVK, motion. Is there a second?
Vice Chair Smith.
Second by Vice Chair Smith. Okay, there's a motion to adjourn and second. With this, Ramon, if you would lead us in a roll call vote to adjourn.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Roll call vote for the adjournment. Honorable Raymond Smith Jr., how do you vote?
Green.
Thank you. Honorable Raymond Smith votes green. Honorable Jimmy Yellowhair, how do you vote? Honorable Elmer P. Begay, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Elmer P. Begay votes green. Honorable Amber Kenneth-Carty, how do you vote?
Delegate Amber Kenneth-Carty votes green. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Amber Kenneth-Carty votes green. Honorable Nathaniel Brown, how do you vote?
I vote green.
Thank you. Honorable Nathaniel Brown votes green. Chairman, we have 4 members voting in the affirmative, 0 opposing, chairman not voting, and 1 member not voting. Chairman.
Thank you for that roll call vote. There is a vote of 4 in favor, 0 opposed to adjourn, and we are hereby officially adjourned at 10:48 a.m. Budget and Finance Committee members, our staff, OLC, Office of Management Budget, Office of Controller, and Department of Justice, and everybody else listening in. Thank you for being on this call. And we are hereby, we'll be at Navigate. So go now. Stay safe out there.
Chair Henio, this is Vice Chair Smith.
Vice Chair Smith?
Just FYI, could you let the chair of Navigate know that my battery's dying and I need to get it charged? So I'll be calling in probably about 10 minutes late or 15 minutes late.
Appreciate that. So should I Speaker Damon know that Vice Chair Smith is he's charged, yeah, on his battery for the phone.
All right, thank you. Budget and Finance Committee, have a good day.
Thank you, everybody, for joining our meeting today, and I hope you have an awesome day. We'll look forward to having further discussion on this topic Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, June 29th. Thank you. Goodbye.